Hi everyone, Hungry Reader here. And here we have a unscripted video which I call The Night Before BotCon. That's right, I'm going to Pasadena for BotCon. And I had another video planned and I never got to it. Partly because I had an incredibly busy week, but also because I am terrible at time management. I will admit that first thing. Since my rather epic video that I had planned isn't complete yet, I didn't want to leave you with two non-update Transfourweeks in a row, so we're going to go over some of my extensive Transformers book collection. Now, when you think of Transformers books, you probably think of comic books above all, but I have got lots of text format Transformers stuff. Many of them are, of course, children's picture books. Let's look at a few of those. Most beloved to the hearts of many G1 Transformers fans are the Transformers Big Looker storybooks, which I have two of them, and it's The Battle for Cybertron and The Great Car Rally. These are both illustrated by an absolutely glorious illustrator named Earl Norem, and his illustrations are absolutely the star of the whole thing. The Battle for Cybertron is, I would say, this is the book to start with for Transformers in general. This just lays the whole thing out for you in no uncertain terms. Autobots and Decepticons comes to Earth, they fight, humans help save the day. That's all you need to know. Good guys, bad guys, we help. The Great Car Rally, on the other hand, you know what? I'm going to do a whole other video on that one. Here's a larger format book, The Autobots' Secret Weapon. This one is, well, the illustrations are not quite as lovely. I mean, there's some really weird coloring choices going on here. This story is about how the Constructicons and Devastator show up and the Autobots are powerless against them until they build a giant statue of Devastator and they all hide inside it. Yeah. I have to... Whenever I see a classic work of mythology recreated in this kind of style, I have to wonder how many kids got to like their Greek mythology unit in 2nd or 3rd grade, and then when they got to the Trojan horse story, they were like, wait a minute! This Greek mythology is ripping off Transformers! This is another one of those stories that uses a lot of the things that were mentioned in the tech specs that never got used in the show, and actually, it uses one thing that was used in the show, but a little differently. Here, in this picture, you can see Rumble, and he's doing what he... On the show, Rumble would bring out these pile drivers out of his arms to create earthquakes, but in the comics and some of these other ancillary media, Rumble just kind of jumps up and down and throws a tantrum in the grocery store to create an earthquake. No, I want circus peanuts! I want circus peanuts, Mom! Mom! In addition to the Generation 1 books, here's a Transformers Armada book. No humans are credited in the making of this book. It says, story and art by Mada Design, Inc., New York City. The illustrations are nice enough, but there's just no character to them as far as I'm concerned. For the most part, the characters just look like the box art from the toys, which is a common thing in these kind of things. Here's another Transformers Armada book, but instead of a picture book, this one is kind of an early readers thing. What's really interesting about it is that it's annotated. You don't see this a lot. There's lots of... It tells the story in a very straightforward and prosaic style, and along the sides, it gives you backstory about the Transformers, who these characters are, what their names are, and then it starts giving you random factoids like, the first person to reach the South Pole was Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen in 1911. Gulper eel. This bizarre creature lives deep in the ocean. It is little more than a huge mouth and a bag-like stomach. Bible. An ancient book containing the teachings of the Christian religion. Here's a couple of Transformers Choose Your Own Adventure books. Well, they can't use Choose Your Own Adventure because that's a registered trademark, somehow. It's kind of like how Claymation is a registered trademark, even though no one treats it as such. But no, these books are part of the Find Your Fate Junior. Actually, it's Find Your Fate Trademark Asterisk Junior. You know, when I was a kid, When I was a kid, I thought it was an ellipsis, so it was supposed to be like a dramatic pause. Find your fate, Junior. Or maybe you're supposed to say it like the rock biter in Neverending Story 2. Find your fate, Junior. Like most choose your own adventure stories, these have multiple paths and multiple endings. And what's interesting is that there's good endings, there's great endings, there's bad endings, and there's really bad endings that are so bad that the book actually breaks the fourth wall to remind you it's okay, it was only a story. This one even has a sort of bittersweet ending in which, the Decepticons get beaten, but Bumblebee literally dies in the process. This is not something I would expect from one of these, but this is back when they were killing off characters at the beginning of Transformers the movie willy-nilly, so they were like, dead robot, who cares? The invisibility factor. This one is a little bit famous or infamous because a couple of places you'll see spaceships being used, and they are very clearly Star Wars spaceships. Right on the front cover, you can see Cup and Hot Rod and Galvatron is beaming down out of what they made absolutely no attempt to pretend it wasn't the Millennium Falcon. Later on, you see a ship with an Autobot symbol that is very clearly I don't know anything about Star Wars, so it's an A-Wing fighter? I don't know. It's some sort of Star Wars ship, and when I was a kid, I knew what it was because I didn't care about Star Wars then either, but I cared about action figures, and Star Wars had action figures. Now let's take a moment to look at some Transformers reference material. Over the years, they've put out several different guides to it because it's such a gigantic convoluted tangle of mythology that, what are you supposed to do? Here's one of the first ones, Transformers The Ultimate Guide, which was written by Simon Furman, who at the time was the most beloved Transformers writer, who was kind of the honorary Gene Roddenberry of Transformers. He's kind of fallen out of favor recently, but it has lots of original artwork of these characters, all of them looking extremely blocky. I mean, to the point of where the movie designs almost look like a relief by comparison. Most of these Transformers look inflated somehow. That being said, it's absolutely not a waste of money. There's plenty of great material in here. There's episode guides and stuff about how the cartoon and comic continuities crossed over. And most importantly, for me at least, there's this little side panel about Bob Budinsky. Bob Budinsky really is the Gene Roddenberry of Transformers. He's the guy who created all these characters. He's the guy that Hasbro handed him this big box of toys and was like, okay, make up characters for this. And Bob was the one who was like messing with him and like, this guy looks like a scientist. This guy could be a doctor. But until this book came out, for the most part, we Transformers fans regarded Bob as being one of the worst Transformers people because his comics hadn't been as good as we would have liked. Some people are better idea men than they are execution. I should know, I am one. So it's nice that this book specifically says Bob Budinsky's contribution to Transformers cannot be overstated. About 10 years later, we got the Transformers Vault, which is, I think, a generally nicer book. At least it's in better shape now after 10 years. But what I like about this one is that it comes with all kinds of stuff. For example, here's a little recreation of a Transformers cell. Hey, I could just have that in the front, and it's like I'm starring with Optimus and Ratchet. What's that, Optimus? Ratchet? Mirage? You want me to throw you the ball? But most importantly, it has tech spec decoders. Back in the 80s, your Transformers toys always came with tech specs, which was a bio note and their, I guess their D&D stats? And they were hidden under red patterns, and everyone came with a red tech spec decoder like this, so you could lay it over and see the line graph that formed the Autobots' vital statistics. And this is especially important if, like me, you still have your Transformers Collector Sticker Album. This was a retelling of Transformers the movie with a few interesting changes in dialogue and setting. And the funny thing about it was that if you didn't have the stickers, you could still see what was happening, but it came with a red decoder so you could get a sort of glimpse or solve some puzzles and so forth. Although some of them said, sorry, no sneak peek at this picture. Also, this is the book that uses the word Recordicon to identify Laserbeak and the other cassettes that hang out in Soundwave's chest. They didn't have a name before this, but it was recently adopted for some Transformers Collectors Club exclusive comic strips, so Recordicons is what we call them now. But I've been calling them that ever since 1986 when I got this book. But if you want the end-all, be-all of Transformers reference material, what you need is this bad boy. All you gotta do is... And inside, you've got Transformers: The Covenant of Primus. Now, in continuity, the Covenant of Primus is the actual Bible that the Transformers read their history and so forth from. This is not that. This Covenant of Primus is the entire history of the Transformers in one storyline. It's the whole story of what we call the aligned continuity, which entails the previous cartoon, Transformers Prime, the new cartoon that's coming out, Robots in Disguise, not to be confused with the old one from 2001, and several of the recent video games, including the new Rise of the Dark Spark that might be coming out by the time this video comes out. The first half of the Covenant of Primus is a retelling of the origin of the Transformers in incredible detail. And specifically, it's the story of the first 13 Transformers. And it makes some interesting suggestions, like that they weren't always Transformers. There was one who could transform, and then he shared the ability with everyone else, I guess. And the 13 Transformers all had individual powers. Like, there was one who had the power to be beastly. There was one who had the power to be small. There was one who had the power to be female. There was one who had the power to be a quintesson. Let's not get into those. From there, it cycles into the storyline of Transformers Prime and the video games and so forth. And it relays the interesting notion that Optimus Prime himself is actually the reincarnation of one of the original 13. Spoilers. And once you've taken the book out, you can hang this on your wall for a neat wall decoration. If you got some tape. So there's the official media. What about some fan-created media? I've got some good ones right here. Here's a real piece of Transformers history. It's the convention book from BotCon 1995. The first BotCon was in 1994. This one's from 1995. They weren't going to have another one. BotCon 94 was just for the 10th anniversary. But a plucky, hardcore fan by the name of Raksha, that's her real name, by the way, set up this convention, and Hasbro joined in. This one, the convention book features some trading cards on the back with fan art, a comic story with illustrations that, well, it would be rude to say. It has the tech specs for all of the Transformers that came out in 1995. This is when they were really not putting a lot of effort into their personalities. Like, okay, let's look at some of their quotes. Here's Blowout. His quote is, "Want a race?" Here's Gearhead. His catchphrase is, "If you race me, you will lose." Here's Mean Streak. He says, "I'm a fuel-injected firestorm screaming through the streets." And, oh yes, Bullet Bike. He says, "This renegade rebel is ready to rock." And here's Night Racer. She says, "A good shot is better than a big mouth." She was created by Raksha too. This is Let's Draw Manga Transforming Robots, and it's by the company that has designed pretty much all of Transformers' primary competition over the years. They designed the GoBots toys that were being sold in the 80s. They designed the Power Rangers toys in the 90s. They don't look like they'd be especially satisfying toys to play with, which it's kind of how I feel about the GoBots and Power Rangers toys, although sometimes they have their moments. Actually, right here, here's a character that is very clearly supposed to be Lio Convoy from Transformers, but it specifically calls it out as "Don't do this." Last in my fan-created books pile is Secrets of the Universe, a special tribute to Soundwave. This is another book that was made possible by Raksha. She's kind of disappeared from the Transformers fandom over the last few years. I guess it went somewhere that she couldn't follow. You know, sometimes I don't blame her. Soundwave is Raksha's favorite character of all time, although she has a very specific idea of how he should be portrayed. This is basically, it's a tribute to her version of Soundwave, more so than, how he appeared in the comics or, half the time in the cartoon. But, you can't fault people for knowing what they like. She even made up a new motto for him, which is where the title comes from.
The secrets of the universe reveal themselves to those who listen.
Which is a little better than his actual catchphrase, which was,
cries and screams are music to my ears.
It would actually be kind of interesting if that was true, and you could see Soundwave relaxing, listening to, the sounds of humans being stepped on and ground into the dirt. The weirdest part of this whole book is a single page which details someone having sexual fantasies about Soundwave. Now, I'm the absolute last person who should be pointing fingers at who has weird sexual fantasies or not, being purposefully vague. But still, there are some things that even, I don't know how many people owned a copy of this book, but even that many people reading it is too many sometimes. I got a big Transformers book collection. So, which ones are my favorites? Let's get into the special pile. Here are some absolute must-haves that I would recommend for any Transformers fan. Bumblebee and Me, My Life as a G1 Transformer by Dan Gilvezan. Dan Gilvezan is the voice of Bumblebee from the original cartoon. This book is a love letter to all of his experiences on the cartoon. It's also a wonderful resource for getting into voice acting, even though it's all details about how to get into voice acting in the year 1983. It tells you all about who he auditioned for the part of. He tried doing Starscream and also Ratchet. It goes into detail about his experiences with all of the other voice actors, which ones are still his friends to this day, and which ones moved to Utah. It tells the story of how one of the voice actors was also a prolific entomologist, and one day he brought a giant tarantula to work. And he talks about his first BotCon. I was there, I saw him perform, and he was a delight. So, buy his book. It's short, it's cheap, it's worth owning. You may have noticed that I haven't talked about any comics during this whole video. I have tons of Transformers comics. Tons! But everyone else talks about comics. I talk about text. That's my thing. It's what I do. But there's one comic that I specifically love so much that I had to talk about it here. Transformers Evolutions, Hearts of Steel. This starts out with an already interesting alternate Transformers universe where they all showed up on Earth during the Cretaceous period, because they're all transforming into dinosaurs and giant prehistoric insects, and I want to know more about this already. But then I guess they run low on energy and they go downstairs to hide, and then they wake up in the Steam era. This book combines two of my favorite things, Transformers and American mythology. See, this is a retelling of the story of John Henry, but instead of winning the battle with the steam hammer, they make friends because the steam hammer is Bumblebee. There's a few steampunk cliches involved here too. This also involves Mark Twain and Jules Verne teaming up to fight the Decepticons. Mark Twain actually defeats Ravage using his cigar. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, and sometimes it's an anti-Decepticon explosive. The title, Evolutions Hearts of Steel, comes from their intention to make a whole series of alternate takes on the Transformers like this, but I think they kind of busted their only idea on this one, because there was never another. I don't know. How many other universes can you think of to introduce the Transformers into? You could do a Diesel-y story, I guess, but they already tried Transformers versus G.I. Joe in World War II, and that didn't work out so well. Oh, I got one. Spain in the Age of Sail. What if Don Quixote had been right about the windmills being giants all along? I already showed you that book by the GoBots people that I wasn't super impressed with, but is kind of handy anyway. Here's a book that I like a whole lot more. It's You Can Draw Transforming Robots by Sherard Jackson. My copy is actually autographed because I bought it from Sherard himself at BotCon 09. This is not how to do Transformers the GoBots way. This is how to do Transformers the Transformers way. It's almost like a style guide for if you want to do a new Transformers comic series. There's guides to doing simple vehicles, guides to doing complex vehicles, guides to doing beast modes, and kind of oddly, there's a guide to how to draw a gun that turns into a train. This is a great book that I'm going to be referring to a lot for some illustrations in future Transfourweeks videos, so look for its influence coming soon. Finally, we come to the one Transformers book that every fan has to have in their collection, whether you can read it or not. It's Transformers Generations Deluxe. This is a Japanese-only book that is nonetheless the ultimate guide to Transformers in general. It includes gorgeous, full-color, high-resolution photographs of every single toy in almost every single variant you can think of. Not just every single toy that ever existed, but every single character that existed. It has the character models for all of the Generation 1 Autobots and Decepticons, all of the anime versions of the Autobots and Decepticons. There's a whole chapter that's just toys that don't exist. This part alone is almost worth the price of the book, and it was an expensive book too. Look at this. Look at this triple changer that turns from a boat into a bus. You know how long I've wanted a Transformer that turns into a bus? You know how many there are? Look at this weirdo here. You can swap his head for a gun. How does that work? He looks like that thing from Keith Courage in Alpha Zones. Look at these transforming universal monsters. Here's a fly that turns into a mad scientist. A vampire that turns into a bat. A gill man that turns into a coelacanth. Look at this proposal for a Transformers interactive cartoon. It's got a gun that you shoot at the Decepticons on screen, and then it gives you a total of how many hits you got. It's like Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future. Wow, I'm old. Look at this proposal for a Transformers theme park. Timeless literature. But even beyond Transformers Generations Deluxe, there is still one more Transformers book that every fan has to have in their collection. It's Transformers The Allspark Almanac, the ultimate guide to Transformers Animated, the best Transformers cartoon of all time. I don't own a copy. But I'm going to BotCon tomorrow, so maybe I'll pick up a copy there. Maybe I'll pick up a whole bunch more Transformers books. Maybe I'll get to do another one of these videos. Hope you're hungry.